Thank you.
Okay, Bubba, you are ready.
Okay, so I'd like to call our May 28th emergency meeting to order to discuss the 2020 graduation ceremonies. And to begin, Neil, could you provide a little bit of background and legal parameters about why we are and where we are?
Mr. Chairman and board members, in early May, the governor issued Executive Order 138, which delegated to local school boards and superintendents the authority to determine the format of high school graduations, but those ceremonies and graduations had to be subject to mass gathering restrictions. Then last Wednesday a week ago, the governor issued Executive Order 141, which moved the state into phase 2 of recovery from the pandemic. And in that order, the governor exempted educational institutions from the mass gathering requirements. That opened the door to graduation ceremonies that may resemble something that are traditional. Well, under the early May governor's order, Croatan High School and West Carteret High School established procedures for having graduations that were compliant with the mass gathering requirements that were in place at that time. But then last week with the governor's phase 2 executive order, the question arose as to whether school systems could have more traditional graduations. The governor's office came out and said, no, the governor didn't intend to open the door to more traditional graduations, but the frequently asked questions that were issued by the governor's office, that they do not have the effect of law that the governor's executive order has. And so some school systems, Pitt County being one, started looking at whether they could have something more than a traditional or something that resembled a traditional graduation ceremony. Well, East Carteret had not, it had either not planned the hybrid graduation ceremonies that were permitted under the previous orders, or if they had, they were flexible enough that they could put together a more semi-traditional ceremony. When I say that, I mean having something outdoors, have social distancing and that sort of thing. And so I'm just going to call it the East Carteret community started asking for permission to have a semi-traditional graduation ceremony. And that brings the matter to the Board of Education for a final decision. And Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna preface the rest of my remarks by saying that you spoke with some of the East Carteret High School community this morning and apparently have come up with a proposed suggestion that will perhaps make more people happy than less people. And so we will get to that in a minute. Based on that discussion, I have drafted a proposed resolution for consideration by the board that, Mr. Chairman, I think that hopefully you will read in a minute, or I'll read it, but it needs to be read so that the members of the public and the other school board members who hopefully have a copy, but the members of the public will not have a copy, they will know what is under consideration by the board. Now, the fact that the school systems may legally be able to have, or can legally have, semi-traditional graduation ceremonies doesn't necessarily mean that they should have them. The coronavirus pandemic has not gone away. We're trying to ease into phase 2. We're trying to get our society back open, and to do so in a way that doesn't cause a spike in the number of infections. And so that's something that I know is on everyone's mind. Also, we have to consider whether bringing more people together on a campus, even if it can legally be done, does that expose the school system to claims and potential liabilities in the event that, God forbid, there's an infection and it can be traced back to something that we have done? Does the school system have some liability for that? Well, I want to respond to that liability issue this way. The school system theoretically is exposed to all sorts of liabilities for all different sorts of things. And we just deal with the risk management every day. There's a sort of a risk reward analysis that goes on, perhaps not formally, but it goes on with many of the things that we do. We don't have traditional liability insurance. We participate with the North Carolina School Board Trust in a risk management coverage program. But I'm going to refer to that as insurance, even though it is not insurance. It's just easier to understand it if we call it insurance. Our insurance policy does not cover claims for infections from virus, any virus, whether it's coronavirus, whether it is Legionnaire's disease, for any of these illnesses that from time to time crop up. We have an exclusion in our insurance for those kinds of claims. So God forbid, we open up the graduation ceremony, somebody spreads the virus, it's traced back to our graduation ceremony, and we get claims. Our insurance company is not going to step in to provide coverage and assistance as we sort of deal with that claim. But the fact that we get a claim doesn't mean we have liability. As a government entity, we start off by defending on the basis of governmental immunity, which is very, very broad. And so we're protecting tax resources, if you will, from claims based on governmental immunity. But more than that, we have to be negligent before a judge would even let a jury decide whether to let a claim go forward. And so whether or not the school system would be negligent might well be it might ultimately be up to a jury of 12 if it ever got that far. So the moral of that story is that there may be some exposure to risk by doing this, but you have to keep that in the context of we have exposure to some risk every day a school is open and people are on campus. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back over to you if you have that resolution that you are able to read, and then you can ask school board members to ask questions.
I do, and I want to make sure everybody can hear me okay. I'm in the car. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. This is Neil. I hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Yes, I hear you, Bubba.
Okay, I do have the resolution, but before I read it, I would just like to say that we all wish that things were different. We all wish we could have traditional graduations. You know, our job as a school board is to protect the system and our students and our staff. And I do think that we've come up with a good compromise. Our principals and administrators have been working extremely hard on planning these. And I would like to read this resolution, and then we can have some discussion if there is any. All right, this is the Carter County Board of Education resolution regarding 2020 graduations. whereas the governor's executive order 138 delegated to local school boards and school superintendents the authority to determine the format of high school graduations subject to mass gathering restrictions. And whereas the governor's executive order 141 removed educational institutions from mass gathering restrictions. And whereas Croatan High School and West Carteret High Schools devised graduation exercises that were compliant with the previous mass gathering restrictions. And whereas the East Carteret High School community has requested permission to hold a semi-traditional graduation ceremony. And whereas the board remains concerned about the potential spread of coronavirus, but realizes society must start reopening for business consistent with law and in a careful and prudent manner. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Carteret County Board of Education as follows. And Neil, I'm going to add one word in here after hybrid, but all high schools are permitted to have a hybrid or alternative graduation ceremony that are compliant with the governor's executive orders for mass gatherings, which, as of the date of this resolution, generally prohibit the gathering of more than 10 people indoors or more than 25 people outdoors in one location without adequate protection from the spread of the virus. The hybrid or alternative ceremonies planned by Croatan and West Carteret High Schools are approved, with the former involving a ceremony in the parking lot with attendance by the graduate and the family members in vehicles, and the latter by individual appointment at school. The board directs these schools to proceed with their graduations as planned. Beginning July 1, 2020, if the state has moved into phase 3 of coronavirus recovery, and if phase 3 generally permits the assembly of persons of the estimated size for an East Carteret graduation ceremony, East Carteret High School is permitted to have a traditional graduation ceremony for the class of 2020. As of July 1, 2020, if the state has not moved into phase 3, or if phase 3 has restrictions on mass gatherings unrelated to educational institutions, East Carteret High School may thereafter have a semi-traditional graduation ceremony for the class of 2020, subject to the following. The ceremony is to take place outdoors on an athletic field or other open space with sufficient space to accommodate social distancing. At all times, social distancing of a minimum of 6 feet is required for all students, separate family groups, and other individuals. More than 6 feet of social distance is recommended. Each graduate will be permitted a limited number of family members as guests as determined by the superintendent. No employee of the Carteret County Public School System is required to attend the graduation ceremony. In the event of adverse weather, the ceremony may not be moved indoors. Face masks for all persons on the school campus for the ceremony are strongly encouraged. The superintendent is delegated the authority to regulate other aspects of a semi-traditional graduation exercise not specifically addressed herein. The situation with the pandemic is fluid. The board reserves the right to modify the provisions hereof as appropriate as circumstances merit. This resolution is also subject to further emergency orders issued by the governor. And that concludes the resolutions. Are there questions or comments from anyone?
So you're saying July the 1st, is that going to be the official date that they can do the ceremony? If everything goes to that third area, if the governor approves it.
That is the first date that they would be able to. It doesn't say they have to do it on the 1st.
Okay. So we need to make it clear that anything after the 1st of July, if the governor approves the phase 3, that they can have it outside based on protection and everything and distancing apart.
Well, it says beginning July 1st, if we've moved into phase 3, East Carter is permitted to have a graduation ceremony. I mean, if we need to make that more clear, we can, but they are not to have a traditional graduation ceremony before July 1st.
Okay, that's a Wednesday, July the 1st is.
Well, again, they may pick another Friday or whatever.
Right, yeah. Because the 4th is on Saturday, so they may not want to go.
We'll leave that up to them. They'll decide. It's their graduation, and they'll decide when they want it. They just have to have it after July 1st. Are there any other questions?
The other two schools are going to be able to do it before that then, if they do it the virtual way? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, nothing has changed for them. This resolution is directing them to proceed as they've planned. They have spent countless hours. They've already hired vendors, spent money. They have phenomenal programs planned for their graduates, and we, by this resolution, are directing them to proceed with those plans.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Have they set a date then if they go that route?
Yeah, they're already set. I think I don't have it in front of me. I think I should know because my daughter's one of them. But Richie, is it the 5th of June for both? Yeah, the 5th I think for Croatan. What about West?
West is doing it the 2nd and the 5th.
Okay, 2nd and the 5th, and then the 5th for Croatan, Jake.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? If not, is there a motion to accept the resolution?
I'll make that motion then, Mr. Chair.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion, Jake. Second, Catherine.
Yes.
All right. All those in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. The resolution passes unanimously. Again, the last thing I'd like to say is just this has been an incredibly fluid series of events. I personally wish that we could have provided some more guidance. It has changed so much, but our principals and administrators have been working just incredibly hard to make this as memorable as any other graduation ceremony, and I can't thank you enough for that. Are there other comments by the board?
I just think it's been a very incredible year with what we've had to go through, and having to go through it and get past it's been, a hard time on everybody. So it's been that we got the fact that we're going to let them go through a graduation and all that to get that done is just great too. I mean, the best way we can under the law.
Very good. Are there other comments? I kind of jumped the gun here when we started the meeting. If we could back up just a little bit, and if somebody could move to open the meeting, and then a second.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'll open the meeting for the day of May the 28th.
I'll
Well,
second
All
that.
right.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think that's necessary. The meeting was scheduled, noticed, and you opened it. I think that's fine.
Okay, well, in case it's not, I think we had a Jake and a motion, and who was the second?
Brittany?
I'm sorry, Brittany, and so should we proceed with that just to make sure our I's are dotted, Neil, or do you think we're okay?
I don't think so. You're okay, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman. I mean, you don't have a motion to open your normal meetings. You don't need a motion to do this.
Okay, very good. Are there last comments, anybody? If not, then we'll adjourn. All right, well, if we didn't have a motion to open, I'm assuming we don't need a motion to adjourn.
I would do that. Yes, I would have a motion.
Motion to
Mr. Chair, I'll
adjourn.
make that. This is Brittany. I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Brittany.
I'll-
Brittany, motion.
I'll second then.
Jake, second. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, goodbye, board members.
Thank you.
Thanks.